From the heartland of America, it's the Bail in the Midwest podcast, hosted by Shane Rolf. Executive producer, David Stuckman.
Hello and welcome to the Bail in the Midwest podcast, where we explore a variety of topics related to bail, pretrial release, and the criminal justice system in the Midwest. My name is Shane Rolf. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Kansas Bail Agents Association, and I've worked in this field for the past 39 years. So, bail bondsmen do not always deal with the nicest people in the world, and even worse, we're usually not dealing with them on their best days. Plus, the friends and family who want to help post bond are often not that much different from the behavior of the person in jail and can become very agitated when the bondsman says, no, we're not posting bond for this person. Keep in mind, it's not their best day either. And of course, when people have missed court, we often have to go out and physically arrest them and return them to jail. And that can easily become a high-risk situation, both before, during, and after the arrest and surrender. Now, a very smart man once said that the best method of self-protection was, and I'll quote, "Don't be in stupid places at stupid times with stupid people doing stupid things." That's like 99% of the problem. Being randomly attacked in a public place, like in the middle of the day, in a nice part of town, when you're not buying crack and you're not drunk or high, the odds are very slim that something bad is going to happen. Unfortunately, as bail bondsmen and bounty hunters, we don't always have the luxury of not being in stupid places with stupid people at stupid times, so understanding self-protection is critical. Fortunately, my guest today is an expert on this exact topic, and as you might have guessed, is the source of the quote I just read. Hopefully, he can give us a little bit of guidance. Mike Willever is a retired veteran of both local and federal law enforcement. He is the host of the Active Self-Protection Podcast, ASP. That show is consistently recognized as a top podcast in the self-defense area and is frequently listed among the best for defensive education. Their YouTube channel has 3.5 million subscribers, so I'm guessing they have one of those 1 million subs plaques from YouTube, but we're a little shy of that here at the Bail in the Midwest. In addition, Active Self-Protection, the company, also provides training, both live and online. And for my Kansas people, they're holding an ASP skills seminar this April in Manhattan, Kansas, and hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit more. But the bottom line is that Mike knows his stuff. So Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for that kind introduction, sir.
Well, I do sort of prep for these things, so I did hear that quote, and it's like, well, this is perfect. This staying out of trouble is always about not getting yourself into trouble in the first place. But
to be abundantly clear, that is John Correa's quote, just for the record. I do quote him saying it, but I don't want to get in trouble. So that's my boss. So yeah, that's his original, and it's very true. You're correct.
Okay, well then, two smart people have said the same thing. So talk about your background a little bit here. I know I get to local law enforcement, ICE, but how did you get into law enforcement, and what was your progression? Because I mean that's not always the most common path. Sometimes you have that local to federal, but a lot of times the feds are trolling law schools and other things for FBI. How did you end up doing both?
Yeah, you mentioned school. Let me get this out of the way real quick in case there's any young people listening who are considering a career in law enforcement. I always say this off the bat. Get your degree if you think you need it to get into the agency you want to get into. Some federal agencies require a bachelor's degree. Don't get it in forensics or in criminal justice or whatever, because if you change your mind and want to do something else, which happens with some frequency, that degree and $8.34 will get you a medium latte at Starbucks. So just something to bear in mind. So it's for me personally, my story goes back to when I was a very small child. I was being picked up at an airport to go visit my grandmother by my cousin who I'd never met. And I was an impressionable 5-year-old. The cousin I never met was the chief of police in a very small township in New Jersey and walked up to me in his full uniform and said, "Are you Mike Willever?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Come with me." And I didn't know what was going on. Anyway, it was my cousin Wayne. And I got into his police car, and he drove me to my grandma's house and let me play with the lights and siren. I saw all the equipment and the shotgun in the center, and I was hooked at that moment. I wanted to become a police explorer in Montgomery County, Maryland. Another thing, cadets and exploring is a great idea for young people who want to get into LE. It'll give you a really good idea if it's something you actually want to do or not. Because again, I think a lot of folks watch TV shows and see movies and have an idea of what they think law enforcement is like. Then they get out into the real world and see that it's kind of ugly. And any bail agent can tell you, it's what's the word I'm looking for here? Unpleasant environment, generally speaking, with unpleasant people, and they do unpleasant things. And sometimes I think people think they want to do this job because they've seen Law and Order SVU one too many times. They get out in the real world and they're like, this kind of sucks, actually. So I went to become a police explorer. When I turned 21, I became a seasonal police officer in Ocean City, Maryland. I think it doesn't exist anymore. And then went on to be a police officer in Washington, D.C., and then joined the feds in 96 under the old DOJ Immigration Naturalization Service, which then molded or formed into part of the Department of Homeland Security in 2003 to become ICE. We joined with, INS Office of Investigations joined with Customs Office of Investigations, became Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And then after that, we separated off from ICE to become HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. So a long story to say, I retired as an HSI agent. And later, if you want to get into all the distinctions, I can tell you all about ICE, ERO versus HSI, the immigration function, the criminal administrative side of that. I'm genuinely an expert in all that, so I can help you out with it if you're interested.
Well, the one thing that is really bothering me about ICE, and again, it's no bother with ICE, but is the mask issue. And I want to kind of touch on that too, because the masks are really upsetting to me, but not because I'm worried about some, BS Gestapo police state coming into being. I think that's all just social media noise. But why it really bothers me is because if you look elsewhere in the world where the police have to wear masks, it's places like Mexico and Colombia, and the masks are worn to protect the police and their families from drug cartels and terrorists. Is that what we've come to here in this in this particular environment?
As a federal agent in almost any agency, you got a target on your back from cartels, both human traffickers and drug traffickers. That's just something that comes with the job. Back when I worked in San Diego, there was the Ariano Felix organization who ran Tijuana, and they had $1 million bounty on the head of any ATF, DEA. They didn't care. FBI, could be anybody. Agent that you brought them. No one ever took him up on it, but Kiki Camarena did get tortured and murdered in Mexico back in the day. So it's a real thing. In this case, the more recent use of masks has to do with what's called doxing. People have heard of doxing. It's basically, the idea is someone sees Mike Willever out on the street effecting an arrest, takes a picture of me, finds me on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and then decides to tell everybody in the world where I live, where my kids go to school, all that sort of thing. And it's a very ugly practice, but it's unfortunately something that's very real. And now agents are, you've seen what's going on in Minnesota with agents having to hide what hotel they're staying at, all sorts of things. If I can just get to the heart of the matter really quick about why they are out doing what they're doing or were doing what they were doing, it's very simple. And as any bail guy would understand this as well, because it deals with jails. I used to work in something called the Alien Criminal Apprehension Program. And what that was agents like me would go to a local jail or a local prison, state prison, and we would interview all the detainees we could find and determine if they were a foreign national and if their crime that was committed was sufficient that their green card could be taken away by an immigration judge and they could be removed back to the country they came from, or if they were just here illegally or whatever. If I determined that, we would put a detainer on them that would go in their file at jail. And when it came time for them to be released, they would call ICE. We would come pick them up, take them to our facility directly from the jail in a safe handover in a safe environment to our facility. And someone like me would sit down and go, okay, here's the deal. Yes, you have a green card. However, you've committed an armed robbery and a domestic violence. You got convictions for all this stuff. Therefore, you're going to go see an immigration judge. I would set that up. The immigration judge would then determine if that person can stay in the country or if their immigration status would be revoked. Now, what has happened, unfortunately, in a lot of cities across the country, to include Hennepin County, Minnesota, is that for some reason, the mayors, the chiefs of police, the sheriffs, whoever, city councils, have decided sort of unilaterally not to cooperate with the federal government on this anymore and just release people, violent felons in many cases, to the street. So you saw a couple of years ago where ICE agents were having to stand outside the jail and chase people down or go to their homes. So if we were able to if we were able to get these folks directly from jails and take it to our facility in a safe and orderly fashion, none of that would have been necessary. However, no amount of cajoling on the part of the administration could change anyone's mind. It was ICE bad, immigration enforcement bad, and that's just not going to work in the long term. So, fortunately, it seems like Tom Homan and the people in Minnesota have worked something out to get things a little bit more orderly. I hope so. I certainly hope so. But I just feel like if a group of people decide they don't like that the laws that their duly elected representatives have passed are being enforced, the way to handle that is to vote for people who agree with you, change the law in that sort of way. But following LEOs around, yelling at them, screaming, blowing whistles, interfering with them is not the way to go. And, it leads to, unfortunately, stuff like the stuff we've seen in Minneapolis.
Well, kind of one of the examples that I've tried to throw out there is like, if the police were running after a bank robber and the general public was trying to block them because, well, he probably needs the money because of our corrupt and racist system. I can't imagine that anyone in the public would be rationalizing that behavior. It's okay to go stop the guy and stop the police from stopping the bank robber because, well, it's unfair and he needs the money. It's a ridiculous argument. But on your point about the detainers, obviously, we lived that detainer issue directly because we saw it, suddenly drop off during the Obama administration, where they decided that, well, administrative detainers from ICE didn't count. It had to be a judicial detainer. And so then all the detainers that were placed, they all of a sudden went away. And I mean, and that was gold for both us and our local jail. Our local jail was buying buses to transport people based on the money they were getting from ICE, because if they had an ICE detainer, they were getting a per diem rate at the time when they were there, even if they were being held on state charges. But because they had that ICE hold, they got paid for that. And it's like that was a real boon to them, as far as just their budget was concerned. But it also helped us because the first thing you have an ICE detainer. Well, I'm going to pass on posting that bond because if step A is, well, I bond you out, and then step B is you get convicted and go to prison, and step C is then you get deported. Well, why don't I just skip that whole get convicted and go to prison part and leave right away? So it was really helpful for us from bondsman's perspective to go, okay, well, you're not here legally, and so I'm just going to step away from this because you're a much higher risk to fail to appear than if you were a citizen. And then, of course, then it came back with a vengeance during the first Trump administration, and then Biden administration. All those detainers went away again, and now we're back to the detainer stuff. So you're really, from a bail bonds perspective, you're getting whipsawed back and forth on that. Well, what is the rule? How is this going to be done? It seems to me like the law is pretty clear, but anyway, it's frustrating. So anyway, let's get into active self-protection here. What exactly does ASP do? I know you do a great podcast and lots of talk there, but what does the company itself do? Tell me about the training and that sort of stuff.
So John Correa started active self-protection. It's been over 15 years now. I want to say 2011 is when it was incorporated. And I'll just tell the quick story of how he got started, which was he was doing jujitsu. He was training jujitsu, and someone showed him a video of a knife attack, a real live video, surveillance video of a knife attack. And he watched it, and it was very horrific to watch. And he thought to himself, man, I don't know how I would defend against that, with empty hands. So he took it to his jiu-jitsu instructor, and they kind of workshopped it with a bunch of guys on the mats and worked on it. And then he decided, well, I learned a few things. Let me hop on my Facebook page. I hope I'm not missing anything in this story, by the way. Let me hop on my Facebook page and tell my friends what I saw and share the video. And it was just like that. He became the John Madden of on camera violence, where all of a sudden people are coming to him asking his questions, his opinion on stuff. It turned into a YouTube channel, which turned into what it is now. And what it is now largely is a place where sane, sober, moral, prudent people can come to get a lesson every day on how to prevent becoming a victim of criminal violence, of whether it's domestic violence or violence from strangers or armed robbery or whatever. And if they are faced with such a thing, what they can do or what they shouldn't do, perhaps, in a response to that. Twice a week, John and I get on camera and we discuss a badge cam, dash cam, law enforcement incident. That's where I come in, by the way, on the videos. And we will talk about what the officer or officers or deputies or whatever did right or wrong, what they could have done better. And we do our best to call balls and strikes. Of course, YouTube, as you know, I'm sure, sir, being what it is, people will take what you say and they will filter that through every life experience they've ever had. In our case, through every maybe unfortunate cop who was a jerk to them on the side of the road or whatever thing they saw. And for some reason, no matter how clear we are that a video was one way or another, for example, we could say, man, that officer really screwed up. He shouldn't have shot that person, or whatever the case is, or he went overboard with the way he detained that person. And there's still people in the comments saying, I can't believe you're covering for this cop. It's unbelievable. And we're like, did you watch the video? Like, I don't think you watched the part where we spoke. And it's like the exact opposite when we say an officer did a great job and people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you said such bad things about that officer. It's nuts. It genuinely is crazy. But aside from that, we do all sorts of training. I'm not so much in the training end of things. I did a lot of training as a firearms and DT instructor for my agency back in the day. And I kind of like doing the podcast and the videos. That's more my speed now that I'm old and retired. But Neil Widener, Chris Bean, Stephanie Widener, and John, Carrie Dudenhofer, all these folks do a fantastic job going around the country and training all sorts of different stuff. Skill Summit is just what it sounds like. They have them in different places. They have one in Arkansas coming up as well. Manhattan, Kansas. So we'll talk about the conference later, but Manhattan, Kansas has a special place in our heart. I really recommend any of those training classes for folks who are already, I wouldn't say they're not really for beginners. So if you're just starting out, like you don't have your CCW yet and you want to learn from the jump, these frequently aren't really for you. The conference might be for you a little bit more than that. But these are folks who already kind of are in the loop. They already have a CCW, they're already sort of experienced and they want to up their game a little bit. They want to get faster first draw to first shot, or they want to get more accurate or whatever. That's what these classes are mainly focused on. The conference, however, which is this year in August, actually, the last week of August in Manhattan, that's really for everybody. And it is for, newer people and more advanced people. There's a lot of classes from world-class trainers. And for that, I don't do a lot of training. For that, I'm actually Saturday night, I'm the worship leader and I play the piano and sing songs about Jesus on Saturday night. So that's what I do there.
Well, good. I have a story about that, and maybe you can jump in on this as far as training goes. 30 years ago, I mean, I'm a lot older now than I like to think of myself as, but 35 years ago at least, the only way you could carry a concealed weapon in Kansas was to have a private detective's license. There was no, open carry, no constitutional carry, none. And so the only way that you could do that was you had to get your private detective's license. So you had to have a private detective agency, and then you had to go through all the training to get that. And so basically you had security guards and private detectives that would go through these classes and that were put on. And my mother at the time had a private detective. She was doing insurance investigations and she did paralegal work, but it was all kind of under this umbrella of Young and Associates investigations. And so getting into the bail bond world, it's like, well, you need to have a gun. At the very least, you need to have something to protect yourself if you're going out in these circumstances. So we got tied into her private detective agency, got our license, and went through all the firearms training. And it just was shocking to me how dangerous these people with firearms actually are. I mean, you go through security guards, and one of the classes I took was with that was a security company, and it was a retired FBI agent who owned a security company now. And so then he did all the training for all of his own security staff, but he also did outside training for PIs and other companies. It's like these people could not hit the broadside of a barn with their gun. There was one of the classes I was in, well, my brother was standing to the left of somebody, he was standing to the right of somebody, and he kept getting little cuts on the side of his face because they were all on the line. It's like, and this guy had an old revolver that he'd obviously dropped 15 times, and so it was shaving lead off and cycling over him. It's like, you really need to get a new gun. But the one that was really the scariest is these people were going in to get a concealed carry permit, and the gun he brought in for training was like an old Army single action revolver with a loading gate, single shell at a time loading gate. It had like at least a 10-inch barrel on it. And it was on the verge of being a black powder pistol. And it's like, why are you here? Why are you can't really go through the training? Because I mean, at the training at the time was if you had a revolver, you had the speed loader because you had to get your 5 or 6 rounds off and then reload and fire again. If you had a semi-automatic, you had to drop the mag and get it back in. There was no way he was doing any of that. It's like, how would you? And so then he gets up and you're doing that point hip shooting where you just reach out, you pull and fire, and you're all of 5 feet away from the target. Pulls out this huge hog leg thing and fires it, rips the target in half, and it's like, I'm not participating in this. So we went to a different one, but that was a guy, private detective security guard, and he's running around, and you never really understand. If the only thing you've ever done is stand there, 3-point stance, shoot at the target, at paper target, 10 yards down the road, how much more difficult it is if you just change that angle? If you just move 15, 20 degrees over and you're shooting at an angle, you'll miss 80% of your shots if you haven't practiced that way. So this one was, you were running around behind walls and barrels and doing all this stuff so you can get there. And this guy is running around with his pistol side angle, and he's carrying right here, right underneath his chin, with a loaded round in it. And they're like, whoa, stop. I mean, they canceled, they stopped the whole thing to get him. It's like, we don't want you literally blowing your face off in our training deal. So anyway, I'm assuming your training it's much more upscale than that as far as the firearm training is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. So usually what happens at any of our safety, or excuse me, our range classes, our skills summit, or any individual class at the conference is we do a safety check. So we check everyone's firearm to make sure it's not, borrowed from the outlaw Josie Wales or from the guy from Dances for the Wolves or whatever. And we also will check holsters. There are holsters that we don't allow on our range for various safety reasons. I won't name any names, but you probably know what I'm talking about. And then there, certain kinds of ammunition that aren't so great, the steel jacketed stuff, or stuff that's kind of goofy, and then we will check each individual person to make sure they know how to draw from a holster safely, all that sort of thing. And we will lose money sometimes and send folks home and go, listen, nothing personal, we love that you came out for this training, however, this or that thing isn't going to work this time. Go fix that deficiency and come see us next time. We'd love to train you. Occasionally we get people who we call them the Elmer Fuds. Everyone's heard the term FUD in the gun world. It's usually the older male, someone who looks like me, who, his grandpappy fought in the war and taught him how to shoot. And you're not sure why he's out of class, because there's nothing he can be taught. He knows everything already and has these really bad habits ingrained. We had a gentleman a couple of years ago at the conference who kept drawing his gun, his loaded chambered gun, from the holster behind the line and just looking at it and showing it to people and all sorts of stuff. And we went like, hey man, can't do that. You're going to need to stay in the holster. And he just refused to listen. So we had to excuse that guy. I don't like public ranges, to continue this thought, for that reason. They scare me. Those little dividers at a public range, those plastic dividers in between the lanes, I got news. Those are not made of Kevlar. They're not bulletproof. You can't see what the person next to you is doing. And if you ever want to go to a public range, just do yourself a favor and stand outside the window and just watch for a few minutes before you decide to go in there and take your life into your hands. Because you'll see people point, they're like, oh, what's up with this gun? And they're pointing it at the head of the person next to them, or they're waving it around. You can go on YouTube and check up, I think I would search for gun range fails to see instructors having to disarm people because they're doing things that are so patently unsafe. Yeah. If you come to an ASP, an active self-protection training class, you can be assured that we have sufficient ratio of instructors to students and range safety officers to students. You can be assured that we've done a safety check of every student before we begin to make sure they're competent enough to take the class that they're taking, and that their equipment is high enough quality that it's not a danger in and of itself.
Well, I've listened to some other stuff where you talked about, and that's equipment versus mindset. And equipment's great, and I want to talk about some equipment stuff earlier. But what's the mindset that you have to have if you're going into an active self-protection situation, or is it just a general mindset all the time, or do you have to heighten yourself if you're going into certain situations?
Well, as far as training scenarios, situations go, I think it's important that people get complacent, instructors get complacent, and they might shorten their safety brief, or they might not do quite as thorough a safety check before a class because they're like, I've done this 100 times, and this or that has never happened before, therefore I can just proceed. That never happens at one of our classes. If we, for example, we have the conference, and we have instructors who aren't our instructors necessarily. They're other national instructors that we have come and teach classes. And if we find out that one of them is doing something unsafe, we'll excuse them, off the bat. Unfortunately, that's happened before. I think a quality safety briefing to include, the cardinal rules of gun handling safety and talking about them in a real way, not just listing them off as rote, but saying, keep your gun pointed in a safe direction. Okay, that's fine. What's a safe direction? Let's define that really quick. What does that mean exactly? Instead of saying safe direction, John likes to say, keep your gun aimed in a direction of least consequence. So a safe direction could be downrange, right? As you're all standing in a line and there's no one downrange. Well, if somebody pops up downrange, all of a sudden that's not a safe direction anymore. So it's a fluid concept. In addition to that, I think just giving everybody the idea off the bat, the mindset that this is not a race. This is not a competition. We're here to learn. If you see anything unsafe that's going on the range, raise your hand. You're all range safety officers here. So if you see someone doing something goofy, raise your hand. Let us know. We'll get it fixed. We'll get it addressed. But I honestly think that I never worry too much at active self-protection events about range safety. I know it's being handled competently, but I think if you're going to a public range or to a class, I think it's worth walking up to the instructor and saying, talk to me about your safety procedures before we start here, before I'm in a room with a bunch of other people I don't know who are going to be handling firearms, before I go into a range with a bunch of people I don't know. Ask the instructor. If they go, well, I'm an NRA certified instructor, so that's all you need to know. Well, I got to tell you, no offense to the NRA. We love the NRA, and we love all their courses. They do fine work in the training area. However, the standard it takes to get an NRA basic, pistol instructor isn't that high. It's just not a high bar to clear. It's sufficient for the job, but I think you should ask your instructor, hey, what's the last class you took? When's the last time you went out and, took a class and learned something? Because as an instructor, you need to be a perpetual student. It's a big part of our ethos as well. John, Steph, Neil, all those folks, they will go to classes all year long. They kind of have a competition for how many training hours, as a student that you put in this year. And I think you should go to your instructor before class or look them up or research them online, see what they have on their website. When's the last class you took? What's your philosophy on let's say someone does get shot here today by accident. What do we do? Who goes where? Who calls 911? All these things should be covered in the safety brief. And if they're not, that's a red flag. And I think the most important thing is if you don't feel safe in a training environment, leave. Get out of there. You're like, oh, but I paid $200 for this class. Not worth it. Just like anything else, we talk about these incidents that we cover on the main channel. By the way, we have two channels, Active Self-Protection and Active Self-Protection Extra. I'll talk about that in a minute. On the main channel, we cover, self-defense incidents for the most part, except for when I'm on, that it's law enforcement incidents. I'll give you an example of one of the things we cover. Police are knocking on a door of an apartment complex, and the guy inside says, who is it? And they say, it's the police. And let's say that guy doesn't believe them. He's not sure it's the police. So what does he do? He comes to the door with a gun in his hand. Now, this is a big thing with our viewers who are very split down the middle about this. Well, is that his right to do that? Yes. Does that make it a good idea? No, I don't think that it does. Just like arguing the validity of an arrest on the side of the road isn't the place to do that. Coming to the door with a gun in your hand is your right. Well, you can be dead right. And we've seen that time and again where I think someone came to the door concerned it wasn't the police or wasn't sure what was going on. So they throw the door open with a pistol in their hand and they end up getting shot. Sometimes the police aren't justified in doing the shooting that they did. And that's terrible and it's unfortunate. But frequently people will say, well, it's my right to do A, B, and C. And I think the question you should ask yourself before you do anything is this worth it? Is this worth my life? Or is this worth my freedom? If I do something, you'll see people, their cars being broken into or whatever, their sheds being broken into, and they call 911 or maybe they don't, and they run outside with a gun to go investigate. Our ethos is do not do that. Do not walk out front with a gun to investigate the car burglar or the shed burglar or whatever, if you think someone's in your house and you can retreat with everyone that you love into a locked room with a firearm and wait, we recommend that over searching your own house and looking for potential bad guy. That's very unpopular, however. People don't want to hear that. I think people have this idea that, well, I'm going to clear my house and I'm going to, I've been through this training. Again, you can do that if you want to. We think it's a bad idea. Now, obviously, that doesn't count if you're in the back bedroom with your wife and you have small kids that are in between you and that danger. Obviously, that changes everything. But I think that leaving a training class because you don't feel safe makes all the sense in the world. Maybe money back, maybe you won't, but it sure beats getting shot by one of your fellow students because the safety class or the safety briefing wasn't sufficient, or not knowing what to do if someone gets injured or, God forbid, shot in a training-related accident, not knowing who's calling 911, not knowing where the emergency exit is, not knowing who's going to be doing what, not having those assignments handed out, all that stuff. If you don't see that stuff being done, if your instructor isn't a perpetual student, these are all things to consider before you continue with a class or before you take a class. No one of them necessarily means it's not a good idea, but you can see a pattern form a lot of times. And look at reviews, especially when you're taking classes. You look at reviews, see if the guy's a creep and he's sexually harassing his students or whatever. See, because that happens too. See if he has complaints about being, too much of the authoritarian, knife hand military guy yelling at his students or whatever. You could save yourself a lot of headache. That's just my 2 cents. I hope I didn't ramble too much there.
No, and I think it segues nicely into it. And I mean, it's basically, if you don't feel safe in the class, you should leave. But just out in general public, if you don't feel safe in a situation, should you plow ahead into that situation, or should you be like, hey, listen to that radar that's going off saying, hey, something's not right here. How, should I step away from this? I mean, what if you're just out and about in public? I mean, what's the mindset there? I mean, I know there's an old Jack Reacher book that, Reacher, of course, is attuned to everything that goes on all the time. I mean, he's the perfect whatever, and you don't get that, but so he's attacked and immediately responds like this. You don't, but what's the mindset you have to do to, one, live your life so where you're not worried about everything around you, but still be sort of aware of what's going on around you to where you're not going to get yourself into a bad situation.
That's a perfect question for us. I want to point out before I answer that question that the Jack Reachers and the Jason Bournes, those guys, to the extent that they're trained and they react to everything the way they do, those guys don't really exist. They're not really out there. There's operators, there's bad guys that, they're good guys, but bad men who do all sorts of bad things, even they can get got. So I just want to poke a hole in that really quick, that movie trope. So I'm so glad you asked that question. Stephanie Widener, our CEO, gives classes, a lot of them exclusively to women, but not all of them. One of the things she says is, if a thing is starting to happen, and fill in the blank with whatever your situation is, whether someone's following you down the street or you're in the parking garage and there's some guy standing around and you're like, I don't know, this seems weird. Or if you're a high school student in a classroom and you hear a bunch of pops and bangs in the hallway, that's actually not fireworks. That's probably not fireworks. That probably is gunfire. The point of all that is to say this: you need to rapidly and radically accept that a thing is happening and then react to it. Now, I think the reason people don't do that with some frequency comes down to, I think everyone's heard of this by now, normalcy bias, where you're like, this is probably okay, or I've seen this before and it worked out, nothing happened. So if it's a creepy guy, 4 cars down in the parking garage, if you have your palm pepper spray, they're a sponsor, by the way. If you have your palm pepper spray, have it in your hand. If you're a concealed weapons carrier, get ready to draw your gun. You might need to, you might not. If it's time to call the police or yell and scream or draw attention to yourself or whatever, don't not do those things because you're worried you'll look foolish or silly or whatever. That's the number one. I think it's one of the number one killers of people, especially women. We're like, well, I don't want to overreact. I don't want to be seen as foolish or silly because I said A, B, or C, or I called 911, or I had my pepper spray in my hand, or I turned around and went back inside because it didn't look good. I think people will normalcy bias themselves into bad situations. Then frequently those situations will happen when you're not following one of the rules of stupid. And I think everyone has to violate those from time to time. You don't get to decide if your kid gets, is throwing up at 3 a.m. and you have to hop in the car and take the kid to the ER. And then on the way home, you realize, oh man, I was I was going to get gas tomorrow morning on the way to work. I'm out of gas. I'm not going to make it all the way home. So now I've got to stop at a stop and rob gas station at 4:30 in the morning. I don't have a choice, or I'm not going to get home. I think everyone can land, and you can be around stupid people and not know it, for example.
Right.
You don't always get to choose who you're around in public. You could be at a stupid place at a stupid time for the reason I just outlined. So you can't always follow those rules. But when you find yourself in a spot where something doesn't seem right, radically and rapidly accepting the fact that something's going on is critical. Why is that? Because until you accept the thing is happening, your mind can't start to formulate a plan about what to do. If you're like, this is probably fine, this is probably fine, that's all that's going through your head. And if you don't move on to, well, this could be something, so how should I respond? Should I go back into the mall? Should I get back in my car and lock the door and wait and see what this guy does, with my kid in the back? What can I do to, if you're that kid in the high school or the junior high school and you hear pops and bangs, now's the time to do whatever it is you thought about doing, whatever your active shooter training tells you to do. Now's the time to implement it and maybe get the attention of other people. Maybe now's the time to barricade the door. Don't wait till you confirm that people are being shot. The sooner you act, the better. And again, I can't say enough about how that time in between the stimulus and accepting something's going on can be seconds. Every millisecond that you waste wishing it away or hoping it's not true, you're losing time on the back end to be able to formulate a response and then go with whatever plan you come up with.
So how do you, one of the things that is always kind of is this hesitation issue. There's always the hesitation / fear about there's always potential consequences from use of force. And so, I mean, you're like, well, am I going to get sued? If you're a police officer, am I going to be the next Derek Chauvin on the news? Is there going to be institutional support from my people? But I mean, can fear of taking that action also cause you to hesitate? I mean, you got all these things running through your head at the same time, and then you're like, oh shit, and then it's too late.
The answer to that is absolutely. Okay, so I'll deal with it more from a law enforcement end, because that's my bailiwick, that's my wheelhouse. I always tell, when I was training cops, I would tell them, always be sure that where you are in that moment, at any given moment, that you're there legally. What does that mean? So if I'm a beat cop walking down the street, am I where I am legally? Well, of course, yeah. I'm just walking down the street in the beat on my beat, checking businesses or whatever, driving through a neighborhood. Okay, that's easy. Let's say you go to a call for check the welfare at Mike Willever's house, and the door is ajar, and you see some stuff knocked over, you knock, there's no response. Can I go in? Is this an exception to the Fourth Amendment? Am I allowed to walk into this house right now? You need to know these things ahead of time. And then when you get in that house, if you're confronted by someone with a gun, what might enter your head rightly is, this could be the homeowner who had a medical emergency, and now they fell and knocked some stuff over and left the door open, and now they've just come to, and they hear someone in their house and they've grabbed a gun. Here's the bottom line: that's possible. That could be what's happening. Probably isn't what's happening, but it could be. We've seen it happen before. So know that you are where you are legally. So if I'm in that house legally, and it's the homeowner who now, for better or worse, doesn't understand that I'm law enforcement, doesn't recognize the uniform, and raises a gun at me, what am I going to do? It's a really ugly, awful position to be in. But if you can't retreat, if you can't get out of the way, if you can't stop that person from doing that, unfortunately, you're justified in defending yourself. Now, that'll really upset a whole lot of people, but it's true. I think a lot of the law enforcement, the hesitation frequently is, I don't know if I'm justified to do what I think I need to do in this situation. I don't know how much force I'm allowed to use. And that can go back to a lot of things. It can go back to bad training. Unfortunately, the standards, I hate to say it, have gone down a little bit in who we hire these days compared to what it used to be, because through all the defund the police and cop hating stuff, the police have been demoralized, and a lot of folks don't want that job anymore. I'll give you an example. When I applied for a police job back in the mid 90s, I think the average, and this is no exaggeration, was for every open position there was on a police department, they had 500 to 800 applicants for every single position. So exponentially more difficult. Not to brag that I got hired under that, but I did. Now, they're bringing people in. They're like, please come apply for this job. Please come apply for this job. And they're getting people in and they're failing the polygraph. They're failing the background. They can't do a basic, obstacle course. They can't jump over a 6-foot wall or whatever. And so the quality of cop we're getting, but that's a bit of a digression. Back to your point, I think that's the biggest reason why. The other reason I think is obvious is political. If I'm a police, I'm going to name a city, but you can figure it out, dear listener and viewer. I'm in city A. And the mayor of that city has said, I think that the police are almost always wrong when they use force. In the city council, and you've seen cops who had a righteous use of force get hemmed up and end up having to hire a lawyer to defend themselves or get fired or get dragged to the court of public opinion. Are you going to hesitate? I say you still shouldn't, because your life's worth more than the potential outcome of a investigation that isn't quite being intellectually honest. But understand, if you're in that agency, in that locality that doesn't support the cops, that tries to hem them up every chance they get, know that when you hit the street, and understand that if you use force to defend yourself, there's a possibility that'll happen. And if you can't live with that, I would find another job. Genuinely, I would look somewhere else for employment. Now, easier said than done. But I wouldn't want to be in a position where I went out to do my job every day in good faith, and used force in good faith to effect an arrest, and knowing that there's a 50-50 chance, let's say, that someone's not going to like the way that looks. Because here's the bottom line that undergirds all of this. Watching someone apply physical force, violence, to effect an end is ugly. It's unpleasant. I think any bail agent out there will know that when you have a guy who's like, oh, crap, it's Bobby from the bail bonds agency. I know what this means. This means he's coming to get me because I FTA'd to my prelim. I need to go now and run out the door or shoot him or do whatever. Seeing that force applied is ugly. It's unpleasant. It's something that people don't see every day. If you're not in the law enforcement, or in your case, the bail bonds field, you don't see it all the time. You don't experience it. So when the average person sees a cop doing his or her job well within the confines of policy, well within the confines of the law and the rules of use of force, when they see that, it just looks bad. It just plain looks bad. And that's kind of an obstacle we're up against that I think a lot of folks don't talk about, is the average person seeing you closed fist punch somebody in the face, and you didn't necessarily see what cue led the officer to do that, right? Then all of a sudden the cop's just beating somebody up. So I think there's a lot of challenges in that area. Great question, by the way.
Well, this kind of leads me into another story that I had kind of queued up here. And this was on a lot of different topics. When I first started, I was 20 years old when I started doing this, and so it's been a long time. And so the first time I had to actually go physically pick someone up. We're going down to this flea bag motel in Kansas City, Missouri. And because the guy had missed court and he'd been shining me on about how he's going to get it fixed. And because you're making phone calls, you're trying to get this resolved without having to go physically, grab a person. But finally figure out where he's at. We go to grab him. And, I'm 21-year-old white kid from the suburbs. And so we hit this motel and, drag this guy out of bed with another guy. And it's like, which is shocking. I mean, maybe not shocking now, but 40 years ago, it was a little more shocking. And, it's like, put your pants on, let's go. And so foolishly, we get him up, and I've got another guy with me, and we did not hook him up right there. Should have put him in handcuffs right there, in the room. Okay, we're walking out, but we know, we don't want to make you look bad. We're walking out of this hotel motel thing. And so we walk him out the door. Got, each of us has a hand on one arm. And man, as soon as we hit the door, boom, bolts. I mean, wiggles and takes off down the street. And of course, I can't run for shit. I'm slow. And so, the other guy's with me. He's running after him. And so I'm running, and it's like, I've got a pistol, and I'm like thinking to myself, what am I going to do with this? I cannot shoot this guy for running down the street away from me because I was an idiot for not handcuffing him in the first place. But when it kind of gets into the whole, hey, you're being exposed to something that you didn't really even know existed at the time, because this was not a pleasant environment. And that's mild, some of the things that have happened since then. But it also gets in the whole, you can't just take out a gun and think, okay, everything is going to be fine. There's got to be some physical component. You got to have some ability. What are the physical components that you need to be able to handle yourself with in those sorts of situations as well? Because you can't always just shoot somebody.
Right. Well, first of all, I think we can talk about this. Associate to associate here. The first time you laid hands on someone to put cuffs on him was really weird, right? That was a really strange situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
To
Especially, I mean, I'd wrestled a little bit in high school, but that was the extent of it. I played football, but that was just banging with pads and stuff. But it's like when you go to actually physically grab somebody and they don't want to be grabbed, it's like, ooh, I don't want to touch you. It's just weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to deprive someone of their liberty for the first time, for me to put handcuffs on somebody. I was a seasonal cop in Ocean City when that happened for the first time. For me, it was I think I was 20, actually I was 22. And having 50-year-old men call me sir was a strange experience. So yeah, the first time you lay hands on someone to put handcuffs on them. Real quick note before I talk about what's required. I want to tell anyone out there who puts people in handcuffs for a living, whether you're in the bail bonds field or whether you're in law enforcement. Really important tip here. The person can be completely cooperative the entire time. And I bet our host will back me up on this. The moment they hear those handcuffs start to ratchet, if they've been locked up before, it's like a Pavlov's dog response. It's like that whistle. And that's when it settles into them frequently. Uh-oh, I'm going to jail right now. That's the time I think you're in the most danger. Get those cuffs on as quickly and efficiently as you can. Now, as far as what's required when somebody resists, I can't tell you enough how important physical fitness and being able to defend yourself is. Arrest techniques is something that's hopefully is still taught in every police academy and every federal law enforcement academy. But I've seen a lot of cops who have no idea how to fight. They have no idea how to wrestle or do jujitsu or anything, and they have a heck of a time getting someone into custody. In their defense, getting someone into a set of handcuffs who doesn't want to go, by the way, especially a wiry, light female, fun fact, is extremely difficult. I think I'm the first cop to talk about this in the history of mankind. No one else wants to say it out loud. Getting a 120-pound female with wrists the size of toothpicks into a set of cuffs and keeping her there, for whatever reason, is exceptionally difficult. I don't know why that is, but it just is. I think the important thing to bear in mind, if you're going to put cuffs on someone and they start resisting, first of all, before you put cuffs on them, try to put them in a position of disadvantage before you do that. Don't just first of all, don't walk up to them face to face and go, okay, you're under arrest. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. You see that on the TV shows and movies all the time. By the way, that's a terrible idea. What you're doing is, what they're hearing is, all right, now's the time for you to punch me in the face and run the other way. That's what they're actually hearing when you say those words. So I think a little bit of surprise is great. I think putting in a position of disadvantage is also good. I think having a partner with you, if possible, is also a huge plus. But I think understanding the body, understanding leverage is really important. Understanding how you can move a person's body. For example, people probably know this already, but I'll say it. Where the head goes, generally speaking, the rest of the body tends to follow. If you can manipulate the head, that's great. There's a ton of things to learn. I just think that honestly, high school wrestling is a great intro to putting people in handcuffs. Jiu-jitsu, I think every officer, deputy around the country should have just do 1 year of jiu-jitsu. That's all you really need to get the basics down, to know, hey, when this guy jumps on me and I'm on my back now fighting for my life, what can I do? We had a video recently on the main channel out of Florida, I believe. Of course, it was Florida. And it was a Walmart shoplifter, and they had an off-duty deputy in uniform working security at the Walmart. And he goes, hey, man, stop. The guy doesn't stop. He chases him. They end up rolling around on the floor. And the suspect then has a yard sale, a swap meet of all his stuff. It's strewn out in every direction. And they're fighting. And you could see the guy ends up at the top. You could see this, I think it was a deputy or an officer, doesn't matter. You could see him wrapping the guy up and wrapping his legs around it, putting him in his guard, and like doing things he's done, in a jiu-jitsu class. Almost 100% true. Whereas if you don't have any of that training, you're on your back. People tend to panic when they're on their back and someone's on top of them and they're in that position of disadvantage. So I think having the training ahead of time is crucial. And I think for anyone out there, two things I recommend to anyone who's a self-defender. If you're not comfortable carrying a gun, that's fine. If you know that already, don't carry a gun. or unless you go to a class and someone can tell you otherwise. If you're not confident with a firearm, if you don't like the idea or whatever, because if that's your mindset, the odds of someone taking that gun away from you and using it on you are exponentially higher. I think getting some martial arts training and a small can of again, a sponsor of Active Self Protection is POM, POM, because we love them. And I've had at least 10 people on the podcast who've used it against bad guys and dogs, and I've never had a problem. I think a can of pepper spray and some jujitsu will go miles towards two things. One is your ability to defend yourself, but most importantly, your confidence that you can defend yourself. If you're walking around in the world saying, well, I've seen a few Jason Statham movies, I've watched The Bourne Identity, I think I know this works, and hoping you can defend yourself against criminal violence, hope is not a strategy. So I would get some training, I would get some pepper spray. If you think a gun is for you, if you can't afford it, get some training. Talk to people who know what they're talking about, can tell you, help you choose a gun. You choose your own gun, by the way. Don't want you to choose it for you, but help you choose the proper gun, the proper caliber, the proper equipment, the proper holster is important. You don't want to get, the Glock 19 is probably the most popular pistol out there, right? You don't want to get a Glock 19 and then not put around in the chamber and throw it in your pocket and hope that you can get that out, chamber around, and defend yourself. Odds are you won't be able to do that. I think getting the proper training is actually critical.
Well, it's sort of a question I had about, because, and you more or less answered, but my daughter is in her mid-20s, and I can track her phone and I can track her car, and she's got pepper spray, and then if she goes out, she'll call me and be like, I'm walking back to my car, and she'll have me on the phone while I'm back to the car, and I've offered to buy a gun and pay for the training and everything, but she has no interest in that whatsoever. Even though there's a small arsenal here at the house, it's like you can go shoot. She doesn't even want to shoot the gun, so it's like obviously that's not an option for her. But the pepper spray deal, I mean, it sounds like you really more or less answered the question. But anything else for women who, because again, if you're not comfortable with a gun, you don't feel comfortable shooting it. You're not going to carry it, or it's more likely going to be used against you or taken away and used against you. What any other advice other than pepper spray for women?
Well, I can tell you this. I'm sure you've taken your daughter shooting at some point in her life, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that's frequently a gateway drug to people carrying a gun down the road, is taking them shooting, because a lot of times people are afraid of the gun, they're afraid of the recoil, the loud noise, whatever. With that aside, I think pepper spray it's not the end all be all of self defense, but I think having a good, not the Ace Hardware, stuff you see in the checkout line. I don't recommend that. We recommend POM. There's a few other nationally known brands. Do a little bit of research. And I would say order your pepper spray or buy it or whatever, and order the exact same kind of spray, but inert, meaning there's no actual pepper spray. It's just an inert liquid. And then
practicing with live.
Right. Right. But I'm saying have that, and do a couple drills. If your daughter, you and your daughter are sitting around, you're like, hey, you want to practice that? She can take her pepper spray, put it in her purse where she carries it, or in her pocket where she carries it, or whatever, and go, okay, I'm coming at you. Can you actually get that out? Can you actually deploy that in a timely fashion? Because frequently people don't think about that. They're like, well, I have my spray with me, therefore I'm all set. Well, someone attacks you and they're 5 feet away, and it's at the bottom of your purse underneath 30 other things, and it doesn't feel distinctly different than your lipstick container or whatever else is in there, you got a problem, even if it's in your pocket. So ours, the one I recommend, has a little clip right here on it, and I clip that into my offhand pocket, and I have practiced over and over again getting that out and getting it up in a defensive way. I think for women, if you're in a weird situation, like you referenced earlier, walking to your car at dark, have it in your hand. Don't feel bad. I can palm this. No one even knows it's in my hand. It's in my offhand. I have my keys in my other hand, and I'm ready to go if something happens, rather than fumbling for it or whatever. But wherever you keep it, make sure you practice getting it out. Get an inert unit and practice actually deploying it and spraying someone in the face with it, and know, well, how long is that stream? If he's 20 feet away, is it going to work, or does he need to be closer than that? That sort of thing. Other thing about pepper spray, I was an instructor on pepper spray as well. Don't overdo it. We call it blessing them with the hot sauce. That's another one of John's originals. Just a quick like that, just less than a 2-second burst is all you need. If you overdo it, you're actually delaying the effectiveness of it. And then the last thing I would say about pepper spray is, like anything else, if it's not on you, it's not going to help. Let me disabuse people of one thing, by the way. I've heard people talk about all sorts of other things you can do, brass knuckles or stun guns or whatever. I don't recommend any of those things. Brass knuckles are probably illegal in most places anyway. Stun guns are really ineffective. Again, it's probably something going to get taken away from you. And, will it work? It might not. Pepper spray works, I would say 99% of the time. I exposed well over 500 people to pepper spray in training, and I only had a couple people who it didn't ruin their day completely. And those people were still like, oh man, that hurts, but they weren't completely disabled. So no one enjoys it. But I think pepper spray is remarkably effective. But again, research what brand you get. Don't just get the one in line at Walmart or Ace Hardware or whatever. Get a quality one, get it in their unit and practice using it. I think you're way ahead of 99% of the people out there.
Well, that's good advice. I mean, actually, I'm tempted to go online and see if I can find that particular brand for her, because I guarantee you she wasn't walking with it in her hand. I think it's on her keychain, so she wouldn't have had it out until her pulled her keys out. And so, well, it's still my car, but okay. So I know I got like 16 other things I want to talk about, but I know we're running out of our time.
I talk too much. That's my fault.
Oh, no, it's not that. It's this is good. So the ASP Active Self-Protection website is activeselfprotection.com. And I went on there, so it's got links to the podcast, but you also have an app, which I assume is a video version of the podcast, so that you're not hamstrung by YouTube, content rules and stuff, so you can actually talk about things and show the stuff that YouTube would not either demonetize or completely remove the video for. So does it cost anything to download the app, or?
No, the app is free, and the video podcast on the app is free. Why you would go out of your way to see my face for an hour is beyond me, but some people do. I have no idea why. So there's a bunch of free stuff on the app. So you can get the app and check it out. You can do a limited trial. Frequently they'll have free trials, or they'll have a certain percentage off every month. I should know this, but I don't know how much it is for the highest tier of the app. But we have I think one of the things people will talk about with the app is the community is fantastic. There's no YouTube troll type people over there, making mean comments and stuff. It's very supportive. There's a lot of smart people on there. We do live streams 3 times a week. In fact, I'm doing one tomorrow night where we do a thing called Good Cop, Bad Cop, where we watch some videos of cops doing good stuff and bad stuff. It's a lot of fun. And the training aspect of the app is fantastic. Every class that we do, there's a video version of it on the app that you can look at and gain a lot of information from, and use that to plan a range session. Okay, I'm going to watch Neil and Chris do A, B, and C. There's something I can actually work on, take that to the range, and then do those things rather than just go and stand at 10 yards and put holes, in the middle of paper. I can do something productive, build drills or whatever. The app is fantastic. Active Self-Protection Extra. And honestly, that's our escape plan. People don't realize, well, you know this, I'm sure, but people who don't own a YouTube channel don't realize that Google owns YouTube, and Alphabet owns Google. And those people don't care very much for the firearms world, for the self-defense world, for the law enforcement world. At any moment, they can decide, yeah, unlike Active Self-Protection, sure, do they have almost 4 million subscribers? Yeah, whatever, done. And they just turn it off, and that's it. So the app is somewhere for us to go if, God forbid, that ever happens. Are we going to be able to are we going to get that many people on the app at any point if they shut the channel down? I don't know, maybe not, but it's somewhere we can go and continue the work. So I think we're doing good work.
Well, and Google is very anti-bail. We can't even purchase Google AdWords anymore for advertising purposes. I mean, we'll still list it on the map and all that other stuff, but if we want to actually buy advertising from Google, they will not sell it to us. That was something that got caught up in bail reform here, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. It's like they won't let you out. I mean, in hindsight, it saved me a whole lot of money because, those AdWords were crazy expensive and they cut off the whole industry. So, you just went back to your SEO, but it's still, if they just decided all of a sudden, no, we're not going to list these, we're not going to list these anywhere. And they could just cancel, you're not on Google search anymore. And so you're screwed. Now you have another, YouTube page that you're on. It was Arresting Developments. I watched some of those actually. Who told you about that? A dancing one on there that the Philadelphia sheriff or something was dancing. Yep. It's like, and that was a recruitment video. It's like, okay, well, I don't know who you're getting off this, but
Yeah, that's a live stream we do. Me and my buddy Joe, who also works for Actors. That's a little fun we have. It's more of a comedy podcast than anything. We will show videos of people being tased, or this goofy sheriff's department recruiting video, or Karens getting owned, or stuff like that. It's just a bit of fun. We do that every Friday afternoon at 6 p.m. Eastern, I think it is, 4 p.m. here in Arizona time.
The one thing that does do, though, I mean, because it's a lot of body cams and dashboard cams and stuff like that have been thrown up. And if you don't go out and actively search those things, you don't really see some of the things that the police are dealing with. I mean, and so, there are people yelling, getting in their face and stuff that you as an average person be like, I would have already punched this guy in the face 4 times before it ever came to this. And the police are like, all right, we're cool. And it's like, why haven't you tased this guy yet? Well, it's coming. If you keep down this road. But it kind of gives people an exposure to what you see in these situations. Because like you mentioned before, use of force is never pretty to look at. But if you see these things, at least you're seeing some of the preface before it got there. You're not just seeing, oh, the taser hit and he fell and, cracked his forehead on the curb. Well, what led up to that? So, I mean, even though it's a lighthearted look at it and you get some commentary, it does get some exposure to what happens out there to people, especially in people in law enforcement.
Yeah, I would say if not just so much for ASK or arresting developments, I would say if you see a video of anything really, but especially of a law enforcement encounter, you see a cop shoot someone and it starts 2 seconds before the shots are fired, or you see a cop punch someone or use a baton or pepper spray or a taser or whatever, and you're like, whoa, what's up with that? Ask yourself, what happened for the preceding 30 seconds, minute, 10 minutes, whatever. What did I not know? What do I not know about the suspect, potentially? What is the officer able to see on with his, Sean says, Mark 1 Mod 1 eyeballs that I'm not seeing with this badge cam that has a giant 480p wide angle lens? And I'm not saying the police are always right. They're not. Frequently, the police make mistakes, or they're just bad actors sometimes and do bad stuff. I think a mature, sober look at things will lead you to that conclusion. Sometimes cops do bad stuff, but most of the time, yeah, you see these bad cams where cops lose their mind and scream and yell or punch somebody they shouldn't punch or whatever, and we all condemn that. But just understand, the millions, there's millions of encounters every day between law enforcement and the public in the United States. And millions of those videos are never brought to anyone's attention. Because why? Because the cop did his or her job professionally, calmly. They employed the right amount of force or whatever it is. And those aren't interesting. They're not going to make the news. They're not going to make, a video of a cop finding a lost child and bringing him home. That might make a video, whatever. But just a normal interaction, it's not interesting. It's not viral. So you won't see it. But there's millions of those every day you don't see that happen.
Well, and that was one of the things when body cameras first came out. Well, this was going to solve all the issues. It was going to reveal how bad the police were. And it's like, it was actually the exact opposite, basically help make convictions. And now we have every police stop seems to have, some bystander with a phone, taking a video of it. And it's like, there are literally millions of videos. It's like, why aren't we seeing at least tens of thousands of bad interactions from those videos if that was really what was going on? Right. These are the outstanding aberrations that you see that go viral because they simply just reinforce what the media wants to push on that. Anyway, I don't want to go too tinfoil hat on that, but it's police do good work, and it's important that we have. So anyway, touch one last thing. You talked about your conference in August in Manhattan, and that was at the Flint Hills. What is it? Foster teen camps where you do that, where you also have a shooting things there. No,
correct.
Kind of close out on that, and we'll let you get about the rest of your day.
Yeah. So Neil and Steph Widener are kind of the lead on this. Neil has a huge heart for these foster teens in Kansas. Listen, if you've never, I'll tell you who deals with foster teens or foster kids, former foster kids a lot, is unfortunately cops and bail bondsmen, because these kids are put through the ringer. They're moved from house to house. They frequently end up in a home with someone who just has them there for the government check they're going to get or whatever. They're abused. They're neglected. It's really a horror show. What the Flint Hills Foster Teen Camp does is bring these kids out for free, because they have supporters and our conference supports it as well. And they give these kids a vacation on a lake in the middle of the Flint Hills, which is a beautiful area if you haven't been. And they're told for the first time ever that they're valued, that there's a God who loves them. They're doing team building exercises and confidence courses. And is it saving the world? I don't know, man. But what it's doing is giving these kids just a little glimmer of hope. And frequently the kids who go through it will come back and work as counselors and work as permanent staff there. So that should tell you something about it. It's a wonderful place to go. What we do is bring in world-class instructors every year for it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday conference. And people stay on the camp sometimes in RVs or in tents even, or they stay out in town in hotels. And for those 3 days, you're given some world-class training. Active Self-Protection actively loses money every year putting this on. We don't, none of the staff gets paid for this any extra. People pay for their own travel. These fantastic instructors come out and volunteer their time, and family members, like my wife, for example, will come and watch babies for people so they can go to class. And we frequently raise over $100,000 for the camp. So all the money that you give for this training, and by the way, value for money is off the charts. The amount of training you're going to get for the amount of money you're spending is a no-brainer. Even if it wasn't for a good cause, it's still a good thing to do. But every year we do it. Every year you're going to meet friends. You're going to make relationships that'll last a lifetime. I can't say enough about it. It's hard to overstate the importance of it. And every time I talk about it, I start to gush and sound like I'm exaggerating. I promise you, I'm not.
Yeah, I've read a book called Troubled by Rob Henderson, and we've tried to get him to come on the podcast, but he's far too busy. But that was basically about his upbringing in the foster care system, and how few people actually make it out of that system without being in jail or dying or overdosing or whatever. So anything you can do to help kids in that situation is God's work. So I'm glad you're, and there is a link to that on the ASP website as well, right? The Active Self-Protection, there's a link to that. So if you wanted to go look at that, hopefully we can throw something here at the end of the video where we can see that as well. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's been great. I've got, I got pages more things to talk about, but I don't want to take up the rest of the day. Maybe we can do this again sometime. It was great having you on. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
We would like to thank our guest, Mike Willever, for taking the time to talk to us today. Whether or not you're in the bail bond profession, but especially if you are, self-defense is critical. There are just too many crazy people out there and crazy people that we have to deal with to not be aware and concerned about your safety. Mike and Active Self-Protection have a great program and great training that can help keep you safe. So I would suggest going to their website and check out the podcast and the training they have to offer. And please join us on the next episode of the Bail in the Midwest podcast, where we will continue to bring you critical information and conversations with people involved in the criminal justice system.
Join us again next time for the Bail in the Midwest podcast, hosted by Shane Rolf and executive produced by David Stuckman.